I'm super excited. We have a guest in the studio today. This is Nina Blackwelder. She is running for District 71 State House here in the Georgia Assembly. Welcome to the Rebellion.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This has just been a phenomenal experience running for office.
How long have you been running now?
Well, it's been, I think, 50 days, which is really exciting. If you are not following this particular election, it's a special election. So they give us 60 days from the time the governor calls for it to actually go to the ballot box. So we're already in early voting with an election date of September 3rd.
Jeez, man, this thing, we got to get this thing out quick, Banks. There's no dilly-dally. It's got to be right away.
Well, 98% of people pay attention 2 days before the election.
That's right.
That's good.
So maybe I don't know if we hold this one or we put it out later. Maybe we'll talk to you about that and put it out exactly when you want it. But at any rate, 50 days. It's almost as long as it took to drive up here from the southwest side of Atlanta there.
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad. This is a great part of the state. I hadn't been up here before, so it was a win-win.
Yeah, we've got one of the first Appalachian Mountains right in my backyard out here, and I know it's weird.
It feels like everybody says that. Like Appalachia starts here, or
Appalachia starts here.
Matt says that about his district.
People didn't say that a while back because I guess they were kind of ashamed of that kind of thing. Appalachia starts here, well, that's where with the banjo music from Deliverance and everything else used to start as well. But no, we appreciate you making the time to come in, and really what we love doing is getting people's backstories and how and why would you make such a foolish decision to run for office. No, what we want to know is where did you grow up? What happened in your life to bring you kind of to a liberty, constitutional, conservative type of platform that you're running on right now?
Well, that's a great question. I'd have to say it's really one of those multi-generational stories. My grandparents immigrated to this country in the late 40s, post-World War II from Italy, and they came to America because they wanted to have this American experience, and they were entrepreneurs. Back in Italy, my grandmother, Rosa, she was a school teacher, but when she came stateside, she couldn't teach here, so her and her husband opened a salon, and he was a barber upstairs and she was a hairdresser downstairs, and that's just what they did for 6 days a week. And they taught all their children to appreciate opportunity. And fast forward to my father, he was a Vietnam medic, 17 years old. He enlisted because he thought he'd rather have that option than to be involved in a draft.
17.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. His older brother was going to college, and he thought, well, this is what I can do to be part of something greater than myself. And he came back and then spent 23 years with the New York Police Department. And that's where I was raised and born, was in New York City. As a teenager, I wound up moving to Tampa, Florida, where I really got to experience a different flavor of conservative values. In Tampa, there's very much a strong Cuban conservative culture there, which is very dynamic and it's very engaging. And I remember thinking, like, this is such a cool concept. And then, like so many other people in the liberty movement, I had my first dose of Dr. Paul. And
yes.
I was like, this is it. This is a big deal.
Ron Paul, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so sorry.
I got to make that distinction.
I'm so sorry.
Banks.
That's right. Ron Paul, the congressman from Texas, that guy. And I thought, man, this is incredible. And we should do this everywhere all the time. And most importantly, the biggest takeaway was leave other people alone. And I thought, isn't that what most people want anyway? Yeah. So that's really the basis of my limited government portion of my platform, is what can we do to get the government out of individuals' lives, out of the community, and let individuals in the community have the opportunity to solve their own issues and concerns and address their worries. And let's do that first. Let's have government be the last option in a line of potential solutions. And when we do need to involve government, let's do it in the most limited fashion possible. Let's bring decisions as local as we can.
Oh, I love
and I'm just super excited to be involved in this process because I'm not your typical candidate.
What?
Oh, shocking, I know. So my background really starts in the nonprofit sector. I originally went to school for pharmacy science. I have a master's degree in pharmacy science. I was a community pharmacist for some time. And then when we moved to Georgia, I was laying on my couch and I was flipping through my phone and I saw this story in the Times Herald about how we had homelessness camps in the city of Holmes, where I live in Newnan. And I thought that this can't be right. So I reached out to the paper and I spoke to, and I'm going to name her, I spoke to Sarah Campbell at the paper. And she said, absolutely, this is a problem going on here. We have invisible homelessness. And so I laid on my couch for the rest of the afternoon because I was in between. We just moved here and I wasn't working yet. And I'm complaining to my husband now, right? Because that's what we do. You moved me to this place and look at what's happening. And he said, well, you should do something about it. And he meant it not in a empowering way, just kind of like you shouldn't complain way.
Yeah.
But I had something for him. So when he got back from work, I had the paperwork for a 501c3. And I said, hey, we can do this. We can build a community solution. And we can find a way to create sustainability in housing for people that doesn't require federal money, that doesn't take state dollars, that doesn't pull resources away from other things in the community. We're going to do something that people are going to love so much, they're going to willingly give to it. And that's what's happened. And we're getting ready to celebrate our birthday here in August, and I couldn't be more happy.
How many years have you been doing this?
So this is a new project. This is about a year old.
Okay.
And the 50C3 was formed and legalized about a year ago. So the project's been rolling almost 2 years because it takes a little bit of lead time on that paperwork with the Fed.
So you have put together a sustainable charity that addresses homelessness in your area.
Yes. So we serve Coweta and Fayette County.
Yeah. And recently, you were actually even asked to come up to Detroit to talk about this.
Yeah, so I just went to Detroit for the Youth Entrepreneurs Conference where they invite 300 community stakeholders from all across the country, and we talk about what entrepreneurship looks like and how do we create sustainability in our communities. And this particular program addresses youth. We know that it's easier to teach children things and all people things right the first time. So by accessing children, we're accessing a market to teach them about sustainability, about capitalism is moral, about how to be, how to create win-win business principles. And it's just a fantastic program. So I was up there for a week in Detroit, and we got to spend some time in a city that's really bootstrapped itself out of a bad economy using the spirit of entrepreneurship. So that's really exciting. Unfortunately, the timing couldn't have been worse because I was invited to this about 6 months ago, and it was right when the governor called for the race. So actually during the qualifiers, I wasn't even in town. I had to overnight FedEx paperwork to be in this race. But I have some great people on my team who went down there and asked all the right questions and got me qualified. Yeah. So
I would definitely say, between Bobby and Duncan and you, you want to talk about guys that are really guys I look at and go, man, what a great team to self-starters, energetic, young people that want to be involved in this liberty movement that are all about, trying to make something happen. You've got a great team there.
I'm so excited. We are a true grassroots campaign.
Yeah.
There's no one who's paid on the staff. We don't have any professional consultants. It's just like, hey, you think it's a good idea? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And then we just do it. So for win or lose, I'm really excited that it is an of the people by the people type of operation.
Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's very cool. I definitely wouldn't advise being outside the district during one's campaign, but I do appreciate you coming here.
We did it all the time.
It's not as far as Detroit, but it's good to know the backstory and to keep your engagements if you told them you're going up to Detroit. So what is the we've talked about your nonprofit a lot, and I love voluntary solutions first thing. And I've got a squishy heart, and so I like the nonprofit world because it's about helping people, which I used to think was a corny thing, but it's actually what makes a lot of people happy in the end. So what's the practical day-to-day of how your nonprofit helps people?
Sure. So often we work from referrals from other organizations in the area. So organizations who might give out food boxes or assist with utility bills, and they'll send people our way that we're seeing a chronic issue with. So it's more than they occasionally just need help when their hours are low. This is something that they're regularly receiving services on. And we discuss the first thing they'll come in and we'll do an intake and try to determine what is happening with them financially. Are they underemployed? Are they making poor financial decisions? What is the root? Because rarely homelessness and poverty is singular. It's usually a symptom of something else. So we try to determine that back cause. And then we offer career services in the practical form of resume writing. We've got a career closet. Hey, maybe you've got an interview, but nothing to wear. Maybe you want to go and be involved in these job seeking activities, but you don't have transportation. We'll do transportation vouchers. And by vouchers, I mean, we have Lyft credit and Uber credit and gas passes and things of that nature. The financial education side is a little bit more in depth. It's a 6-month program that addresses real economic mindset change and practical things like how do you open a bank account? How do we have those skills? And so many things that people who might be listening to this show take for granted. We learned it from our parents. We learned it in school. We had some other contact with someone who knew what to do. We're finding that there's more and more adults who have not had exposure to the concepts that we consider essential, like budgeting.
Very cool. Who are the average people you're helping?
So we see,
And I don't like to group people necessarily and generalize, but it would be interesting to have like the big overview.
so I see a lot of senior citizens over 65 who have not had pension planning or long-term planning. Often they're widowed. So they went from having 2 incomes in the house to having 1. And then I see a lot of single mothers who have usually multiple children. They've got 3 or 4 children, and they are just the cost of living of having so many children is problematic, and they're looking for new solutions for how to have sustainable lifestyle.
So, real quick, let's plug your organization. I mean, what's the name of it?
Sure. So it's the Degree 180 Center. Okay. And can I plug the website, Shane?
Yeah, no, plug everything, because I want people to see this, and I want people to understand, this is what you can do given the proper motivation in your area and obviously outside of the state and force to create charity and solve problems locally.
Sure. So the website is degree180center.org. And it's 100% volunteer run, which is just phenomenal that people are willing to donate their time and talent to such a wonderful cause. My favorite program, though, guys, is our micro lending program. We offer a program where you can borrow based on integrity. It's 0 collateral and there's 0 interest. It just has a $10 origination fee, which covers our paperwork side. And we use this program for helping people that can show they have a sustainable way to maintain whatever it is. So i.e., they've been living in a motel room, but they've been saving their money and they're working their job, but they want to get out of that motel room and maybe get into a home of some sort, of some format, but they need a deposit to make that jump. We're happy to step in and provide that deposit, and then they repay it back into a pool of money that then becomes available for others like them. We also see one-time car repairs. If you are not going to work, then you are going to have a snowball effect, right, in your economics. So we do that, and that is my favorite. Average loan we write is right around $350, which is usually just a small amount of money to get someone over a hump. And our repayment rate is 96%, which is bigger than big bank, and we have a 0 collateral policy. So I'm just super excited.
I was just about to ask what the repayment rate and if you had them. So I'm glad you offered that.
I mean, it just sounds like, this just sounds like one of those models that needs to be, spread and flourish across the entire United States, for God's sakes. I mean, this is awesome. It's
great. We have great clients too, which makes it that much easier. We don't have a collections department. There's no one that calls you and tells you you're late or this or that. But I will get calls and somebody, hey, I didn't make my payment because this happened, because it's back to school and I had to buy school supplies. And there's so much respect and dignity for the individual to be able to address what's happening, and that they know they're going to be treated as a peer. And that's important to me, that when you make that call, I appreciate you calling and letting me know what's going on with your situation. And that's it.
And it's charity based, right? I mean, the people who are funding it in the first place are not expecting a return on their investment, monetarily. What they are expecting is accountability. They're expecting, people to learn, to grow, to, foster, those same things. And, hopefully once they are, back on their feet and, successful parts of their community, they return the favor. I mean, I'm sure that's really kind of the bottom line, right?
Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. We want you to grow and be just a member of community and really have the full experience. Because I live in such a wonderful area, and I want them to have that quality of life too.
No, I think the paradigm shifts completely when you know where the help is coming from.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it instills that sense of community to where you want to help somebody in the future. Like, I don't see how it couldn't.
Right.
If you receive help and you're grateful for it, I don't see how you wouldn't want to help somebody afterwards.
Yeah, you've got to feel something inside. I mean, if you've been down below your last dollar before, and I mean totally on your butt, going, oh, I don't know how I'm ever going to make anything work, and then somebody doesn't just give you something, but helps you understand and grow, and helps you gain those skills again. Yeah, that's obviously something that I think it just has to last inside of you, and that you need to project, that a feeling you want to project out there for the rest of it. Is there anything else on this subject?
Yes, I have a question still.
Okay.
So who funds this?
So it's a lot of people just in the community, regular folks. Quite a few small business owners have gotten involved. They really like the idea of a program where there's some accountability more than a Band-Aid. So I'm loving that. And my family put up the first seed money for it. So big shout out to my husband. I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Mike, for pushing back your retirement so I could give money to strangers. but really, so it's just been it's a lot of really small donations from individuals who were like, hey, I've heard about this, or I've seen this, and I think it's great what you're doing. Or I talked to my neighbor or my kid's daycare teacher, and they said that they received help in one format or another. And it's just been great. I can't say enough wonderful things about it, which probably sounds self-serving, but I'm just so excited about this program because I think it can be duplicated. I think it can be ported to other places, and it just feels good because it's community.
I think it'd be a really neat thing to maybe even go down and interview somebody who's gone through the whole system.
That would be really cool. I'm surprised and very happy that we started a whole conversation with a candidate, not about the politics, not about the race, but about the solutions that we like want to see.
Yeah,
private solutions, having nothing to do with government, putting much more value behind a dollar because the person who's giving is actually getting that value. They're doing it voluntarily just because it makes them happy. It makes them feel like they're doing the right thing.
Can't work in the private sector. Charity never works. Can you imagine if you weren't even I'll say, can you imagine, first of all, if you weren't taxed on all your income and every other source of income that you come from outside of just your everyday career type job? Now, I would even make the concession for at least a while to say, hey, I'm happy to take the same amount of money that I am obligated by force and coercion to give to the different levels of government and then direct it as I see fit. I would be ecstatic to start doing something like that. And then obviously you peel back from even there, and charity is just kind of a natural part of your life anyway. But I mean, the amount that you could get done, I'll tell you right now, if I see something like this and I get to spend the money that I am forced to spend through coercion on what I want, this is one of those programs that, you seed it and you start putting it around everywhere. I mean, because you guys are teaching everything from, basic understanding of money and how to manage that all the way up through, entrepreneurship. And that to me, I think is, obviously what America was built on to begin with, is the ability to go out there and create and interact and sell yourself, your services, or whatever type of widget the market will support to your community. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Have you guys ever gotten any pushback on the term charity, as in charity is not a good thing?
We haven't, per se, at least not openly. Sometimes people are often, when they hear things like sustainable housing solutions, because they automatically start thinking about a government response to that. So we have to, sometimes education around those terms, which usually people go, oh, okay, I never thought about it that way. You're not really talking about, Section 8 or HUD housing. You're talking about how to take their personal situation and put them in something they can afford and something they can manage themselves. So it is affordable and it is sustainable. So, but there's a little bit of a words war, if you will.
Okay, yeah, I've heard from liberals, one being my older sister, the term charity to her is a negative thing, as if, and I'm really not sure why. It's more of a French thing. They've got fraternity like in their motto, but if it comes from the government, for some reason, it's a good thing, because people don't have to beg for charity, whatever like context that has. But if it comes from charity puts people down or makes them feel less or something like that. And I've never understood that concept. But I wondered if that was a thing in America. I've heard one or two liberals say it.
Oh, I hear it on that side a lot, right? And it's the necessity to ask somebody for help, right? It's degrading, it's demoralizing. It's, the problem is when you automatically coerce and take by force from somebody to give to somebody else blindly, there's no value in that. There's nothing. There's no sense of urgency to help, put that back into the original person's pocket. And that's what I think, you miss with charity. And it's not that we want people to feel bad about their life situation, but there is this, for lack of a better term, kind of recompense that happens naturally when somebody takes or borrows something from somebody else. They feel an indebtedness to them. And, when it's mutually agreed upon that, when I give something to somebody else, what I expect in return in the terms that we set, there is this, return where I've been on that other side where, somebody's given me something and I needed to pay it back. And I'll tell you, it burned inside of me. until I not only gave it back, but maybe gave it back with interest. And I think, that fulfills the entire circle of charity. Without that understanding, without that, where did this come from? Who do I need to pay back? You're not fulfilling the circle. It's incomplete. It's not balanced anymore. And so I think, obviously when banks ask if there's pushback, I mean, yeah, I see it on other sides. It's not about, degrading people in dignity and tearing them down. It's about, being whole again between the two parties that had the interaction.
Yeah, I think if we maybe redefine either like take ownership of the word charity, redefine it, or just explain better what value means. And it's not just about the money. Not only does everybody have the potential of giving value to other people, but it's not just about the money. It's about people want to help other people, then they feel better about themselves, you feel better, and that makes for a better community.
And it creates bond. That's what creates community. I mean, that bond you have with the people around you, that's what community is.
I love it. So that's what segued me into politics, actually.
Wow.
Nice segue.
Well,
you can come back anytime, Nina.
Yes. So that's what brought me to be involved in politics. And like I had mentioned, I've always had an interest in conservative politics. And I was like, yeah, I consider myself a Republican, but I wasn't activated yet. And I knew I was interested in liberty, but I wasn't activated yet. And through the interactions with my nonprofit, I found a lot of people on the other side of the table from me were being stifled by government. Right. And I don't mean that like in this really weird cliche way. I mean, they actually had skills, usually around, the occupational skills that they weren't able to perform because of occupational licensing barriers. And it was problematic, right? Because I mean, I would talk to people. In fact, my favorite story to tell is a woman who she wanted to have a hair braiding business. That was her skill set. So when we do this intake interviews, well, what do you do? What do you know how to do? What can we do to help generate revenue for you to help keep your lights on and things of that nature in a long-term way? And she said, yeah, I thought about it. I was going to open a shop, but then I found out I had to go to cosmetology school. And I said, well,
regulations for hair braiding.
For hair braiding, right, in the state of Georgia. So I said, well, I'm not tracking. And she said, well, I have to go to cosmetology school, which is very expensive, but cosmetology school doesn't even teach hair braiding. But they said to be a hair braider in Georgia, to get that piece of paper, I had to go to cosmetology school first. And she said, I don't have $2,000 to go to cosmetology school, so I'm not going to do that. So now instead she was doing something else. She was making food and selling it out of her house or something. But the point is, she was stifled from doing something that she had a talent and a skill, and that there was obviously a market for.
Wow.
Right. And it's really frustrating when you hear those things, because this is a person who's got a self-starting solution and somebody else is standing in the way, and it's not even for a practical reason. I could get on board with a one-day hygiene class. That's like, hey, we just want to make sure we're doing these things, so we don't want to have a potential, like, I guess, health risk. But to send someone to school to study a curriculum and have them pay a ton of money for something that's not even addressed in that curriculum is absurd.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where the market's going to figure it out anyway, right? Like, if you go to a place that is not hygienic and you can tell it's not hygienic, are you going to go back to that place, or are you even going to stay in that place? Like, the market's going to figure that out. There's Yelp, for God's sakes. You're going to get reviews and everything else. Like, hey, you don't want to go here, man. Not only can she not braid hair, but there's lice or whatever else, floating around.
Whatever's happening. Right. So and then the more I spoke to and interacted with people, the more I saw that. And then I started seeing in other areas, someone was telling me that they wanted to live in a tiny house, but the minimum square footage regulation was a problem, and they couldn't get a variance for it. So they're like, in the meantime, they're sleeping on their friend's couch. And I'm like, well, you have your own solution here if other people just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And then I started asking around, why don't we get out of the way? And that's not the way things are done.
We don't get out of the way.
Yeah, we don't get out of the way. We get more in the way.
There's no money in getting out of the way.
Right.
You're so silly.
Outrageous, I know. So I thought, we've got to do something about this, right? And here we are back to the we've got to do something conversation.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Obviously, I don't think there's any question on where you stand on government regulation, business, entrepreneurship. I think we've covered that. I think we understand where you're at on charity. There are a ton of issues the state of Georgia is facing. This past session, Banks is probably closer to it than I am. There was a lot to do about the budget. There's a lot to do about Ralston. There's a lot to do about constitutional carry. I mean, we could sit here for days and days and days. I want to give you, the time to address what you want to address. What is one of the most important things to you here in the state of Georgia?
I've got two. So I really would like to end Common Core, and I want to see constitutional carry.
Nice.
So
tell me about why, what drives you to abandon the absolute atrocity that is Common Core.
Yeah, so Common Core in Georgia has been renamed the Georgia Standards of Excellence, which was a rebranding in 2015, and it kind of was just a hoodwink. So it got individuals off the back of the state for Common Core, but we haven't really addressed it. And the only people that won from Common Core were book publishers. Unfortunately, students hate it, teachers hate it, parents hate it, and it was implemented through a bribe. So if you're not familiar with how Common Core came to be in states, the Fed came out with this program, Race to the Top, and it was money that would trickle down if you adopted Common Core, and the faster the better.
Oh, like interstates and seatbelts again,
Right.
Hey, do as we say and you'll get money, and if you don't, you won't.
Right. And if the Common Core model was fantastic, then states would have voluntarily adopted it. Curriculums would have voluntarily picked it up. And instead, now we've got poor school districts defending Common Core, not because they think it's so great, but because they spend all the money on the books. And they know that they can't go to their taxpayers again and say, hey, we made a mistake with Common Core. Let's go back to what we did before. Because if you're unfamiliar with the book situation, they did a book buyback, these publishers. Mm-hmm. So they got the old pre-Common Core books out of the schools, and then the school districts then purchased the Common Core books. So it's a number of sticky who got rich components to Common Core, but it's not a quality program. That's why you see so many schools, private schools, moving away from it. But the biggest issue with Common Core is we can't have true school choice with Common Core on the books, because if a voucher school takes money, right, and that's how voucher schools work, from the state, they have to have Common Core implemented in the school. Oh. So you think you're getting away from Common Core by putting your child in a voucher school, but you're not. And you can look that right up on the State Department of Education website. It's in their frequently asked questions section.
Wow.
Very interesting. So you mean charter schools is what most people know them by, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the question of the federal government bribing us with money happens on every single subject. I doubt there's anywhere that except maybe the podcast land. Who knows? How do you divorce people from wanting that money? They might even think, like you said, that Common Core sucks, and they might not want it. But there's the practical application. Like the practical application is why representatives take votes and bureaucrats do things. So how do you tell them, hey, you need to lose that money?
Well, I think the first thing is, are you for sale or not?
Wow.
Are you for sale? Is your state for sale? Is your district for sale? Because that's part of what you're saying. If we're taking money without the principle and ethics component of it, I mean, if you want to take good money, but don't take bad money and then expect anything but toxic outcomes. As far as, prior to Common Core, federal money trickled into states for school. That's just the way it worked. But that was the first time, was with the introduction of Common Core, that there was a mandate on the curriculum.
I could see people, having talked to many politicians and bureaucrats, agreeing with you and saying, I know, I wish that I could be, that I could do the right thing, but I can't. So I still wonder if there's a way to tip the scales and be like, this is how you do it so that it can actually work. If not, I just see Common Core coming back and back in different forms because the government wants to give that money, with the strings attached. Well, and is there a perfect solution? I don't know. But I think that if it was just people wanting to do the right thing, I think that most people want to do the right thing.
Yes, the state of Georgia saying, hey, screw you, federal government. We're going to do our own thing. Maybe we'll even keep our money since you don't seem to be the arbiters of it. And not to mention, you have no constitutionally delegated authority whatsoever to take our money and put it into education at all. I mean, it's not a power of the feds. It's a right, or I should say a right. It is a reserved power of the states constitutionally. So yeah, I mean, I would love. I mean, pushback against the federal government is one of my favorite topics, especially coming from our state representatives here. You touch this is kind of an education based subject, so I want to ask you about homeschooling. I'm obviously we're a homeschooling family. And, Georgia's not bad in terms of where we are in terms of the regulations and restrictions with the ability to homeschool your children and really come up with really about any type of education or what's the word I'm looking for? God, I'm not a teacher. It's
curriculum.
Thank you. The curriculum that you want to teach your kids. So where are you on homeschooling here in the state of Georgia?
Yeah, so I totally support parents making the best decisions for their families. So that is education, that is healthcare. If you want to vaccinate your child, you don't want to vaccinate your child, that's all falls under parents' rights and then consequently the responsibilities of any outcomes of that.
Sure.
But I support homeschooling. I applaud parents who do it. My kids go to public school.
Government indoctrination.
I know. I am also not a teacher.
Yeah,
So.
I get it. Trust me. If my wife wasn't amazing at it, it'd be maybe a different story.
Your wife, who is a teacher,
Yeah, by trade. Yeah.
So here's a slightly controversial one. There's a few things that we're talking about on the Common Core, on the constitutional carry, which you mentioned before. You have part of the Republican Party that is problematic to some of these things passing. You've got the Republican Party that's been in control for like
Ever
12 or 14 years now here in Georgia.
Yeah.
Does that factor in? Do you like how much do you realize it from outside of being a representative at this point? And how would you? I assume you see it to some degree. And how would you address that?
I mean, it comes back to the same thing. It's who are you accountable to? I'm accountable to the people of my district, right? And in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the Georgia State Constitution. And there's a lot of people who are currently operating not within those confines, and they're doing their own thing. And just because there's bad behavior doesn't mean we have to condone it. In fact, we should call it out. And I think that covers a platitude of sins that are happening in regards to particularly Republican legislators saying one thing and doing another.
So you think there's kind of and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I was going to say an epidemic. What are your current feelings about most of the GOP House members down here in Georgia?
Well, they're not all villains, but I think more than should have been getting along to get along. Mm-hmm. And what we say we do and then what we actually do couldn't be farther on a number of occasions. And it's disenfranchising to voters. And if we want to be conservative representatives, we want to be Republicans, we want to get elected, we can't disenfranchise our voter base because we're lying to them or because we're saying one thing and doing another and we're keeping them home. Because it doesn't matter how much constitutional freedom I want and how much freedom you guys want. If there's not a voter base to elect people to do that, then it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we've got a clean house on a few people, and I'm not going to name names unless you guys want to name names, but
everybody knows.
And this is important to me because there is one name out there that I want to know from everybody. If you are elected as a GOP representative or part of the GOP or any of that nonsense in terms of what we have to be in terms of getting elected, will you ever cast a vote for David Ralston for Speaker of the House?
Anything short of tar and feathering him is inappropriate.
Wow.
I mean, you can take that to the bank there, David.
So
it just is what it is.
Of course, has a little facetiousness because we don't believe in violence.
No. Of course not. No, but if you were just a party man, he is still bad for you because he's bad for the party.
Yeah.
If you have ethics and morals, he's bad for you. If you're worried about him infringing on the constitutional rights of victims, then he is bad for you. And he is bad news. And it's really heartbreaking that so many people have excused, ignored, failed to recognize what's happening around him and hope that it'll be some sort of self-resolving issue because he's not going to self-resolve.
I think
we could end the interview right now. I think we could probably play that over and over on loop for the people who are in your constituency down there.
I do like the tar and feathering comment.
I love it.
I hope it's not taken out of context by.
So you're I mean, obviously you're signing on to getting rid of the guy in terms of the resolution. Vocally outspoken. One of the things I wish more people would ask the representatives is what type of legislation will you drop? So like constitutional carry, somebody else doesn't introduce it, you're going to introduce it?
Absolutely.
Things like Protect the Guard, are you familiar with that act?
Read me in. Make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, so Protect the Guard Act is something that our buddy out of West Virginia, Pat McGeehan, who's an assemblyman up there, he will not, the bill will not let the United States military take our Georgia Guard and deploy them overseas without a constitutional declaration of war.
Oh, yeah, no. The National Guard is assigned to states.
Yeah.
So yeah, they don't need to go anywhere else. That's
Yeah.
not what they agreed to.
Yeah, so the bill would just specify that directly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That it couldn't
And
be
so
enforced.
and that's what I get at, because there have been a litany, just let's just say 99% of people who ever get elected, right? And as freshmen, they are scared to drop big, bills that change law and policy and the recognition of things because they want to be effective. Do you care about popularity within the chamber once you get there?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't intend to have, my intention is not a long political career. So moves that are made to get along or just pacify my colleagues are of no interest to me. If this is only one term, and I hope it's not, but if it's only one term because I introduced a piece of legislation that puts them on the spot, then so be it. I will just go back to my day job full time. I'll go back to being a director, and that's fine. And that's okay, because we're supposed to go there to impact change, not to get along, not to build the footing for a career so I can run for the next thing.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks. I've been full of questions.
I've got a million. A lot of them that have been addressed. Kind of back to the Republican Party. What are the things that... So I see a lot of disenfranchised Republicans. I've been in the Republican Party for 10 years, and I get maybe more hate than I get love. Being involved, knocking on doors.
From the establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not just from the establishment. There are people who find fear in rocking the boat or so forth. So what are the things that you find most exciting and that fill people the most with hope about being a Republican or representing the Republican Party?
I think people are really excited about what they're calling a new kind of Republican, but people who have been around the party know that these ideas are not new. These are the OG, these are the original ideas, right? So we're just going back to what was old. It's a rebirth of that. But people are really excited to see someone who is not a career politician, who hasn't surrounded themselves with elected officials and all the pomp and circumstance, who's just like, hey, we could do these things and we could do them now. I don't think we should have these, in our 5-year plan or 10-year plan. Let's do our right now plan. And a lot of the legislative things I'm suggesting is rolling back regulations we could do today that could impact change tomorrow that aren't going to have costs to taxpayers. And people are really excited about that. People are tired of being nickeled and dimed to death on the promise of a program that's going to work.
Yeah. That rings such a chord inside of me. And, for the people who are out there within the sound of our voices, if you think just because people are in pictures and part of the circle of power that's why you should be voting for them, I'll tell you what, the antithesis couldn't be more true. It's the people that are probably not funded as well. It's the people like Nina that are outside of this whole thing looking in, that don't want to go in there and play nice, that want to go in there, throw on brass knuckles and do what's right for the constituents in line with their oath to the Georgia and the U.S. Constitution. That's who you guys need to be looking at is these rebels, basically, these guys that want to go in, they want to stir it up. They're not going to take, any crap from anybody else because their allegiance isn't to a party. It's not to a politician, a personality, or, any other person's platform other than their own. I wish you were running here. I wish you were running here.
So on the flip side, one of Matt Gertler, who is a common friend of ours, one of the best things he did during his campaign, I think the first time, is he had this term, limited government conservative Republican, and he had this catchphrase. He would say, I know it's a mouthful, but I have to say that because just being a Republican these days doesn't mean anything. And then he'd go into all the things that he thought we needed to be more outspoken about.
Yeah.
About we need to talk about, we need to push back about. What are maybe the one or two things you think the Republicans as a whole, so mainly that's led by leadership, are doing the worst of, aside from the Ralston thing on policy, so not people?
Yeah, so looking at policy, I think that they are not willing to they'll introduce legislation that feels good to the constituents, but it is really ineffective, and that's really frustrating to me, particularly around campus free speech. So we have a campus free speech bill that passed, I guess, last session or maybe last year. And what we did was we gave the power to the Board of Regents. So we let the colleges govern themselves into making free speech policy. And that didn't make any sense.
Weird.
So, right. So, but we said we hailed it as like a huge free speech victory. But all we did was say, hey, you who's been in charge, who we didn't like what you were doing before, now we're going to pass a bill saying you're in charge to make a policy that does better. And it's ineffective, but then we hail them as victories. And there's a number of pieces of legislation that are like that where we're like, well, I mean, it was okay. Certificate of need is another one where we're like, oh, yeah, we passed certificate of need reform. This is fantastic. Well, yeah, it was fantastic for one organization. And by the way, I appreciate the organization. They're in my town and they employ a lot of people and they're great. But why not open up market options for everyone? Let's repeal certificate of need.
Completely?
Why? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, so the bill basically limited it from people from 100 miles away can contest you opening a healthcare facility to 35 miles. If you live in a more rural area like I do, 35 miles is still a hike. And there's no other industry where we allow competition to regulate who can enter the marketplace.
Well, there is, but
there's
less than in this extreme way.
Right, I guess, right. In this way of in this model, how they do it, it's very, very restrictive. As someone who has an education in healthcare, who was a pharmacist, the best way to reduce the cost of healthcare is increase market or competition in the market.
So do you think I should be able to buy an MRI machine, put it in my basement, and have people come over and charge them?
If you meet the other requirements of being an MRI facility, then absolutely. You shouldn't be limited based on proximity to another facility alone.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, I think so. There's actually a guy who wanted to have a mobile like MRI machine or whatever and be able to drive across states. He tried to come to Georgia and it just didn't work.
I love that you mentioned MRIs. Did you know Georgia is the only state, so 49 other states allow advanced practice registered nurses, so nurse practitioners, to order MRIs except Georgia?
I did not know that.
I didn't know that. Why is it?
The real answer? The honest answer?
Yeah.
Dr. Lobbyists.
Yeah?
Yeah. So basically, Shane, one of your kids gets hurt. You bring him to the pediatrician.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, they do that. They break themselves. So nobody ever really sees the MD anymore. So you see the nurse practitioner and she says, oh, yeah, there's something wrong. Your child needs an MRI. You've got to go to a doctor who will order that. You'll go get the MRI. It'll be sent back to that doctor, then be sent back to that nurse practitioner. So there's an extra person touching the MRI, increasing costs and increasing time for your child to get that treatment. 49 other states allow nurse practitioners to order these.
49.
Yeah, so then the question came up, right? Nurse practitioners, they got together and said, why? And they said, well, maybe all the other states have it wrong. That was a legislator's response to that statement. So
a legislator here from Georgia?
Yes.
Can you tell me the name afterwards?
Yes, I'll tell you the name afterwards. So who is married to an advanced practice registered nurse.
Oh, I think I know who it is.
So,
what?
Yeah. So, those are the kind of things we do. And here in Georgia, we let nurse practitioners write medications all the way up to narcotics, right? They have full prescribing authority in the state of Georgia, but we don't let them sign off on diabetic shoes. We don't let them sign the handicap placard application at the DMV.
Wow.
So are our nurse practitioners less educated than other states? Are they more likely to make errors? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We're not letting them do their jobs. We're tying their hands. And then you could, if you want to go a step farther, you can talk about how we don't allow them to hang their own shingles. 14 other states allow nurse practitioners to have their own standalone facilities and offer preventative health care and some pediatrics. And they're not asking to work in a silo or in a vacuum, because even your regular MDs still have to refer you to specialists, and they would be the same way. If you come in with a concern, you're holding your own head, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to send you to someone greater than themselves who's more specialized. So there's no reason why we shouldn't let them practice the way that they're educated to. Mm-hmm. And we are going to have trouble retaining them because we're educating nurse practitioners here, but why would you stay in a state that limits you?
Not only are we educating them there, we are subsidizing the medical schools in Georgia to be able to educate them.
Right, and then they turn around and they leave us because other states allow them to hang their own shingles.
God.
So this
Georgia?
is something we could fix today. They are ready to work. They are educated. They know what to do. If we would just get out of the way, we could help increase rural access to healthcare and bring down the cost.
I don't think that most people understand why it increases the cost. It's actually very simple. Like, you put more people between you and the end,
anything,
and it increases. But I have a friend who's a nurse practitioner, so I get to like text him and say, hey, what do you think about this, or I need this prescription or whatever. Yeah. And so my cost is zero because it's a friend. But if you could just go directly to a nurse practitioner instead of having to, if you go to an urgent care facility, usually there's one doctor in the whole building, a bunch of nurse practitioners, and you really see the nurse practitioner, and that's it. And the doctor's just there because they need one doctor to sign off on everything.
Right, and you're paying a salary to be there.
Yeah.
Government never ceases to baffle me. I mean, for people who are supposed to be representatives of the people that live in their districts to pass legislation and not speak out or not be upset or just on fire about something as simple as this. When we talk about healthcare and insurance and everything else in America and how the cost of it exploded, not allowing nurse practitioners to do all of these things that are done in 49 other states or and sometimes 14 other states, the means of economic freedom to get people care, and not ambulatory care or anything like that, but just get them at least sustained or diagnosed locally at a fraction of the cost. It seems like just a no-brainer to me.
I'll give credit to the representative who said maybe the 49 states got it wrong. What if even Georgia becomes the 50th state to do that? Great thing. We're advancing the ball towards more freedom. What if even at that point, all 50 states got it wrong? I think not only do we need to look at other states and other solutions and so forth that exist, but we need people who are able to see beyond the, why does a nurse practitioner get to order an MRI? What if just a normal nurse should be able to order an MRI? What if just anybody who wants to should be able to?
What if you just want to go get an MRI?
Yeah, so just to touch on the other states, they haven't seen any decrease in care, and they found that nurse practitioners are no more statistically likely to order an MRI than a doctor. So it's not like people are being over-radiated in these other states, so the evidence supports that it's working. But I do agree. I think that if you want to get an MRI for the sake of getting an MRI, that's your business.
I can't tell you how many times I've had MRIs, guys. I mean, and being over-radiated, maybe that's what's wrong with me. I don't know, but
you fly a lot too. Oh, you're probably kidding. Cancer's coming. Cancer's coming.
Solve the mystery.
So I've got this idea that I've never explored too much, but it's just a surface level. It would be a compromise, which I don't like doing, but where to offer the option for anybody in almost any industry, I'd say any industry, but you don't have to be as radical as me, to put some kind of warning on their business saying, hey, we do not have a government license for XYZ or at all. To where it would be like a side solution for people who would not find the necessity
do business at your own risk
for a public certification. Doesn't mean they wouldn't have private certifications, private insurance, private things like that. What do you think of that idea?
Actually, I like it. So my husband has an experimental airplane, which is a kit airplane, if you're unfamiliar with those. And inside in the passenger seat, there's a sticker that says, this plane is amateur built and does not meet FAA requirements. And then he added underneath it, so there. And it's at your own risk, and that's okay because you're read in on the risk. And as an adult, I think you have the ability to explore those options. Well, so I'm not opposed to that. That's why I jumped onto, if you follow me on Facebook, you know that I've been talking a lot about unpasteurized milk.
Yeah.
Which is really an obscure thing to be worried about in a state legislative race. But
something so simple.
Yeah, well, here we go. So someone called me and they're like, hey, how come in Georgia we can't buy unpasteurized milk for human consumption? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't consume that product. I'm not really read in on it. He said, well, I'll help you out. You can buy it for pet use. But in other states, in some states, you can buy it for human consumption. It's just labeled. And I said, well, is it handled differently? He said, well, no, it's none of those things. So I went and I looked back and I actually saw that Representative Stover tried to introduce legislation for that back in 2014 that just died. And I thought the fact that we've got to write a law or change legislation to say, yes, it's okay for an adult to consume unpasteurized milk is kind of outrageous.
Well, it just
if it's labeled, it's at your own risk. Good luck.
I had this thought the other day in terms of defining. There's a lot of talk and misunderstanding about what the Ninth Amendment is, right? The Ninth Amendment basically in the U.S. Constitution reserves all rights not specifically enumerated in the Constitution to people, and so. People are like, well, that's not a right. That can't be a right. The state has to regulate things like this and that. Here, tell me if you agree with this statement, because I think this probably gets down to core principle and belief, is if a person can naturally produce, grow, consume, trade, where it is a product of their life, their labor, and the ability to trade with somebody else, is that a right?
Yes. Yeah, you have a right to your labor and the outcomes of it. Is that, if I'm understanding the question correctly?
So
okay.
if I go out to my cow, who I've fed with my my sweat and work, and I want to take that cow and I want to milk it, raw milk. I want to drink that milk. That's all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now if I want to take that milk because my neighbor over here also enjoys milk, raw milk, and he doesn't have a cow, is that a right for me to have an interaction with him without any third party?
Yeah, so I absolutely believe that you should be able to trade openly, produce things openly. That's your business. Is that a conversation we're ready to have here in Georgia at that level and that extreme?
It seems so basic.
I know,
I have this conversation with my kids.
I want to abolish state income tax, and people lose their minds over that.
I love the conversation. So
say that again.
So what do people say? Like how do they lose their minds?
They lose.
Does it just like explode?
Yeah. So, and I mean in staunchly Republican circles. I've been at things that are like President's Club meetings and things of that nature. So they're in the camp, and I'm like, hey, yeah, we don't need state income tax, and they're like, what? But how are we? Like,
what? That's a good clip, man.
And it's like,
that's a good clip.
It's meme worthy. I'm like, well, wait a minute. And I said, well, I've lived in states where there's no state income tax. I tell you, it works.
How are we going to get bribed and stay in power? I mean,
shocking. I know. And they said, well, we'll raise the splosh, right? Well, what you're saying is we'll raise T-splosh. I said, T-splosh. You must be talking about the roads again. And we get into this weird space.
That was a good wink.
Yeah,
but we do what we can. But yeah, so I've lived in Florida. There's no state income tax. They do fine. And people argue, yeah, but Florida's got tourism. Well,
we have a huge economic advantage even over that.
Right.
Yeah.
And but then there are some other states, and I'm not gonna. So Texas, right, who is not known for tourism.
Yeah.
And then I'm not gonna beat up on anybody else's state, but there are some states that are not known for tourism that are doing just fine.
Tennessee doesn't have an income tax. I mean, I know they make it up in some other ways, and they do some things, but I mean, income tax. It's like what Ron Paul said, right? When you cut out cancer, you don't replace it with anything.
Right.
That's
right.
I mean, that's putting a tax on production is probably one of the most boneheaded ideas ever, unless you're a politician that needs to stay in power. I mean, that's really about all it boils down to.
Right. And then think of, we could shrink all of the supporting money that goes into supporting state income tax collection, right?
Oh, wow.
All that fat we could cut with that.
Force.
Yeah, all that force, all those people who are involved in the paperwork and the grind of that, we could release that talent to do something else.
So you're saying that we are being taxed for taxing people?
Yes.
Interesting.
I am saying that.
So that I was kind of going to say that one of my responses to people like that is that there are more towards being moral, like more moral ways to tax people, which I think is on consumption. And then to say, well, if we spent less money, we wouldn't have to tax as much. Do you have a number? And if you don't have a number because you don't know about the budget process all the way, do you have a number by which you would at the very least want to cut the state budget by that much? 1%, 99%?
I think 10% is always a good starting point.
Okay.
Like right out of the gate, you could probably find 1 in 10 things that are not working the way they should be.
Or the way that they were
intended.
Proposed to people. Yeah, and then we don't ever judge programs on what they've done. We just say, well, we need to throw money at this because this isn't working. And then, 10%. Yeah, I'll take 10%. If I had politicians here in my district saying 10%, we need to find something 10% this year. You do that for 10 years, man, we're going to be in pretty good shape.
I've seen debates with Republicans or so-called Republicans not be able to commit to 1%.
Man, I'll tell you right now, the guy that we ran against here in the Georgia 7th District, when that question came up at the debate,
not one penny.
But it wasn't that. It said, what federal bureaucracy would you close down? And he said, well, it wouldn't be the Veterans Affairs Department. But then he just went into this, bloviating nonsense where he said a whole bunch of nothing at all at the same time. And he didn't say anything that he'd actually cut. Right? Like, I'm not going to, like, I can't think of one thing to talk about. And I see that with politicians all the time. Right off the top of your head, do you have anything? Obviously, if you want to cut income tax, there's got to be some other things out there that you would love to just say, you know what? We don't need this. What would that be?
Oh, and it might upset a lot of people. There's a lot of things around Parks and Rec I feel like there's a lot of spending that happens that we really can't account for. And I would like to see we could cut, particularly around personnel costs.
Yeah.
We could do some things with parks and rec out that way.
How about
Parks and Rec is literally one of the number one things that's used by leadership in the funding mechanism to control state representatives. There might be a state representative up in the northeast corner of Georgia who was told, that park over there, yeah, we put $1 million in funding there. We're just going to take it out if you don't vote for the budget.
Right.
I know this is going to be a hot one here. I know getting rid of the government indoctrination system, public education, is not one of those things that I think any politician would say, let's get rid of it altogether right now. But in terms of the amount of administration we have in education, the ability to start cutting that and freeing teachers to teach. What do you think?
Yeah. So public school is sort of a sacred cow. Anytime you say anything about it, you're the bad guy. And it gets spun into you must hate children, you don't stand with teachers. And it's none of those things. My allegiance is to students. It's not to teachers. It's not to schools. If you're a great school, be a great school. Keep doing that. If you're a bad school, I want you to go away.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we see bad schools, we plump them with funding, but all it equates to is additional administrative positions. And personnel is not what's causing that school to not work. It's the methodology being used inside that school, and it's the methodology being pushed on that school's throat, right? Mm-hmm. From up on high down to down low, because it's trickle down. So absolutely, I think we could do some work around school, but it's going to be one of those things. There's going to be a lot of pushback, and I think from both sides.
Banks brought to my attention a couple months ago, you had looked up like some of the top administrator salaries here in the state of Georgia, and it was
let's ask Nina to guess.
Outrageous.
So, do you want to guess what the top 5 bureaucrats in Georgia make?
Their salary. And I'll tell you right now, go big.
$250,000.
We're so far off.
No, I know. Just threw the big number out there. Tell me.
It's it's almost $1 million. 4 of the top 5 work for the teachers' retirement funds. Mm-hmm. They manage the pension. They all make, but those top 4 make between $800,000
That's obscene.
And $1 million.
That's obscene. Yeah. So if I could get rid of anything, I would run education. So I don't know if you know, but the State Board of Education for Georgia, those people are all appointed. Nobody's elected.
Weird.
Well, strange how that works.
That's weird because I thought we elected a state superintendent. So you're telling me that he doesn't have any power, really?
Well, right. And then it's a reverse, because then if you go to your local school board levels, you elect your local school board members from your districts, but they're beholden to the superintendent, who is a bureaucrat, and he's got all the power. So the power doesn't follow who we elect. And in fact, if you talk to your local school board members, they'll tell you our job is to agree with the superintendent, which is really awful. Because that's the one guy we can't really get out if we don't care for what he's doing. And he's making all the real decisions. So I would definitely do something about the State Board of Education folks. And I'm sure they're nice people, and I'm sure they are educated on whatever it is that they do. But the fact that we don't elect them and they're appointed is problematic for me, because there's an accountability issue.
Who appoints them?
If I understand correctly, they're appointed by the governor. So.
Mr. Bronkamp right now. What do you know?
Well, I mean, and listen, and that's not a criticism of the governor. That's the system he inherited. However, he could change that, and I'd be really excited.
Be vocal about it, right?
Yes, we could talk about it. And a lot of times they're holdover appointments. So maybe some of those people are appointed. They were hanging out from Governor Deal, so who lovingly renamed Common Core Georgia Standards of Excellence. That was his
surprised.
thing.
So to go back to the pension systems, most of the top paid bureaucrats in Georgia manage different pension systems. We have 7 or 8. There's firefighters, state employees, teachers, and so forth. There's only one of those pensions that is fully funded. Most of the other ones are underfunded by at least 20 or 30%. If I was a teacher, if I was a firefighter, I would want to manage my own money personally. But if I were to pool it within the system, because there's advantages in investing and so forth, and having your money grow and some kind of security, I'd want it to be a private fund, because I think that a private fund would manage things better and not have to depend on the government as much to make sure that there's enough money in there. What would you say to teachers who would say, "Hey, I'd like us to privatize that pension system for 2 reasons, because I think that a private system is going to manage my money better, and that way it's not a burden on the state."
Yeah, no, I think it should be an option. The fact that we're telling people that you are earning a pension, your labor, part of your pay for your labor is translating into this pension, but we're not going to allow you to have any control over it is wrong.
Yeah, and I think it actually wastes a ton of time for all representatives, because every year you'll have three or four bills of different pension systems who are asking, hey, can we have the right to like diversify 5% more into these risky things? Are we allowed to like take more money out of this part and put it here? And that's a lot of wasted time that representatives are on the floor like bloviating and arguing and so forth.
Well, and the reality,
and I don't know why individuals, even if they're working for the state, shouldn't have more control over their own money.
Sure, and I'm going to go ahead and go out there on a limb and say most state representatives are not fiscal gurus, right? So we're asking them to weigh in on on pensions, right? When they're not the expert on that. When we could just let that go into a privatized or the option to privatize, and then we would not be involved in it at all.
Yeah, I personally would deprivatize because there is a burden on the state. The states from time to time, and I know that option, that's, some people would be more comfortable with that, but the state sometimes, just because it gets underfunded, just puts lump sums in there. So the state already contributes for every like state employee and teacher a certain amount, like matching amounts and so forth. But when the fund doesn't do well, sometimes they just take a lump sum of $227 million and just dump it in there because, well, it needs it.
Injecting money.
And on top of it, so employee like pay is not sometimes calculated with all the benefits. If you calculate the benefits, health insurance, pension, and so forth, but that $227 million, this lump sum in there, is never calculated into the real cost.
Yeah.
So,
you guys mind if we shift gears? Because I have a whole bunch of questions about rights and possible legislation to help strengthen rights of your community, of Georgians in general. I mean, one of the huge hot buttons, not only at the national scene but at every state, local level right now, is red flag laws, right?
Right.
Red flag gun confiscation, whatever you want to call it. Tell me your thoughts on it. You know, and as long as you want to go for it. I mean, I really want to know where you stand.
Yeah, so red flag is inherently reactionary, right? It's something that we've come up with because we see something we don't like. Tragedy happens, and it is a tragedy when people inflict violence on another person. That is awful, and we don't want that. But our answer should not be legislation that restricts the rights of people who are not involved in that violent act. So that's a problem for me. You know, I also take issue with universal background check because there's no such thing.
Right.
And often that language gets thrown around as if it's a real thing. And unless we're willing to give up HIPAA and FERPA, and if you're unfamiliar, of course, HIPAA is your healthcare privacy. FERPA deals with educational records of students. You can't have comprehensive background check without breaking down those two things. So are you willing to trade your privacy for your healthcare to go into a pool of information for background checks? So that's a real consideration that nobody's really talking about, because how is it going to be comprehensive when we're not taking someone's mental health status into account? So I say no universal background check. We maintain our privacy around healthcare and our student records. And, you know, it doesn't sound friendly. It doesn't sound nice, but our Second Amendment rights protect us from tyranny. That was its intention. And anything that degrades that is going to be problematic for me and problematic for everyone on a long-term scale. This is one of those first step deals. And you don't want to know what the second and third steps are because it's not friendly. So that wasn't very candidate-like. That was very explicit, but it's important that people know where I stand on that, because I don't want them to feel surprised later on when they say, well, I thought she's got kids, so she would have went along with this, because I'm not going to.
Well, I think it's funny too. I mean, and not funny, haha, but like you have a
I'm laughing.
You have a different angle than I have, and can you touch on the Fourth, the Fifth, and the Sixth Amendments that are violated by red flag laws?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, right, the easiest for me is you're going to have due process concerns. Right. We're talking about, we might be worried about you because of and they haven't established even what the procedure is going to look like. People are talking about, there'll be these red flag laws, but what will that procedure look like? Who will be qualified to say that you can be stripped of your right to due process? Right. Will it be a judge? Will it be your neighbor who reported it to you? Will it be your local municipal whatever? You know, we don't know what that looks like. And it's never going to be what you think it is. The standard's always going to be lower than your expectation.
Do you think there's any circumstance where there would be enough so-called due process to take somebody's guns before any crime was ever committed?
Yeah, no. So I don't think that there's any time or space where we should see someone's personal property without due process.
Yeah, so to warn you, I have seen Republicans argue that if we just phrase the legislation in the right way, make a Republican red flag law, there is a way to have enough due process. And I think they're misappropriating the word due process for it to work.
And that's the problem, right? Like, if you actually know the Constitution, you know the Bill of Rights, due process, we mentioned in the last show, Article 5, obviously you have to have a grand jury convened to present evidence, right? The problem is that I didn't even touch on the Sixth Amendment last time. The Sixth Amendment guarantees you a jury of your peers being arraigned and brought to trial for the charge of a crime. So you have the right to face people in a court of law, and at that point you're still innocent until proven guilty. So you can't possibly serve an ERPO or a red flag gun confiscation warrant where you first and foremost go to somebody's house where they have the right to be secure in their person, property, and effects, Fourth Amendment, take their stuff without a grand jury in some type of court issue, and then obviously the Sixth Amendment where they are in a courtroom with a jury of their peers where they are charged with a crime and then found innocent or guilty based on that. Like, there is no possible way for red flag laws to be unconstitutional. Or I should say constitutional.
Right. So I spoke to my daughter. So my daughter's going to be 14 next month, and she's very interested in liberty things. And red flag has come up. She's heard about it at school. She's on the news. And she said, but Mom, we don't want people who are dangerous out there, like, doing bad things. If somebody thinks that they're dangerous, we should do something. Right. And I said, well, Vanessa, if they're really, really that dangerous or we want to take things away from them, do you think taking away firearms is going to make that person less dangerous?
Right. Truck.
Or telling them that they're not allowed to have firearms.
Right. Do you think that is going to inherit? If that person is so dangerous, then they're not fit. They shouldn't be. They're still in society with us, right? So we're not correcting that concern.
Yeah. Let's take a dangerous person and disenfranchise them. Let's see how that goes.
Right.
Let's bring the full weight of the state against somebody who's already dangerous.
Right. I saw this. If you don't know, I'm 31, which makes me firmly a millennial, and it means that I also communicate in memes. And I saw this great one where it had Jason had his mask on, and he was at the gun store counter, and he said, "Sorry, you've been red flagged." And he goes, "That's okay. Where's your chainsaw section?" and that was a great. There it was, and I'm like, that explains it, So then I said, hey, Vanessa, come look at this. And because she's a Zoomer, she was like, oh, yeah, I get it.
What?
A Zoomer.
What's a Zoomer?
That's Generation Z.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for bringing me up to date, millennial.
There you go. Looking out for you, Gen X.
Zoomer. Okay. That sounds too much like boomer.
Yeah. So that's a whole conversation for another day, but they say that really young people are actually turning away from social media. So as campaigns move forward and these young people get older, we're going to have to go back to reaching them the way we reach people who are not on social media. So at the door in their mailbox, because that they were raised by what they call the mommy bloggers. So mothers who constantly took their photos and put them on social media and told their whole life story. Those kids want to reclaim their privacy.
Alone.
Yeah. So they're not on social media the same way that people who are, our age are on there. So
they'll still be on different social media.
It'll be different.
It'll be more of the Reddit style things or the Twitters that you can have a little bit more privacy on.
Right.
So
I think
they won't be on MySpace. They won't be on Facebook.
Maybe. And the MySpace. Maybe. And the thing is, they'll do it, but they'll do it differently. Maybe and hopefully better than we do. I saw this thing on Netflix last night. I didn't watch it, but I saw the preview for it, and it's where people are using the internet to help each other diagnose and understand diseases they have all around the world. If you have a rare disease, they will come, they will interview you, film it, and then launch that in a specific site where you can look up like symptoms and things like that. Not like WebMD or anything, but like, no kidding, get in touch with this person no matter where they live in the world, provide for translation, you name it, and help these people understand and maybe even find a cure. And I think, if that's where we can go as, the human experience with a tool that we are just Facebook and Twitter and like all that kind of stuff, where we're actually finding things like that, where maybe the Zoomers or Generation Z is that generation. To get back into guns real quick, because you will be, obviously a legislature here in Georgia. Tell me, will you ever put something forth to remove the ATF from Georgia in terms of suppressors and things like that? I mean, tell me your thoughts, because I've seen great pictures, Nina, and I got to say I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah. So every gun law is an infringement, point blank. And allowing a federal agency to come down here and stomp on state rights, because ATF is not a state organization, right? It comes down from the Fed. So we've got something that has come down to us that we don't have a say in how it works. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like all bureaucracies. At the top is someone who we don't elect. Someone who's appointed gets the job, like the FBI and some other organizations. Mm-hmm. And then we're subjected to what comes down. So unpopular, I oppose bump stock bans. I think that's not okay. I think that we should not limit people's ability to purchase and possess items around firearms. I think that that's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I will never put forth any legislation that would limit your scope of rights. You know, if you've seen me on Facebook, you know that I like suppressors. I have suppressors. Yeah. I don't like wearing hearing protection. So for me, it's as simple as that. I can shoot and it's not obnoxious. My neighbors won't complain, and it's easy shooting. It's a quality of experience for me. And whatever your reason is for
You're not an assassin?
No, I'm not an assassin kit. No. But so if you have never purchased a class 3 item before, what happens is you go to the store, you fill out a lot of paperwork, you pay for it, they take that item.
Pay a lot for it.
Yeah, you pay a lot. There's a tax stamp involved. They put it in the safe at the gun store.
And you wait like a year almost.
Yes, and you wait a really long time. If you're lucky, it's only 6 months. And then they call you and say, okay, your paperwork came back, you can have it now.
Yeah.
And then you can have this object that attaches to a firearm that you already have in your possession, right? So we can agree that the suppressor is not the potentially dangerous thing here. And then you go about your business. But I would also like to see where the rules would change, where if you have been previously approved, you didn't have to wait another year, because that's really frustrating if there's been no status change in your application process.
Would you ever introduce any legislation to remove those restrictions here in Georgia?
Oh, yes, I would.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'd be a first term thing, but absolutely. And I would definitely, if somebody else was brave enough to do that, I would definitely co-sponsor it.
Awesome.
So say you did write that bill, and the bill just basically said there's no such thing as an NFA item here in Georgia.
Right.
Pretty simple.
If the federal government tries to enforce NFA laws and so forth, we will kick them out, and there'll be penalties. And the bill
will arrest them.
Yeah, the bill becomes that's what penalties are, like arresting, fine,
real teeth,
so forth. And the bill comes back to your desk, and there's a little note on it. It says, "Warning, Representative Blackwelder. This is in contradiction to the federal government. It could be seen as treasonous, and for that reason, we advise you." These are the lawyers at the Capitol putting this little Post-it note on there. We advise you not to drop this bill, because you get it written first, and then you get to look it over before you decide to drop it, which means introduce it and get an official number. What would be your first thoughts and reaction to that?
So, I love sticky notes. So I might be implied to put a sticky note and write my own note back. But really, you know what I would do? I would bring it back to the people of Georgia. Is this something you want? Is this something that we want to? Was what we do? Because there could be a cost, right? The cost could be.
It's always the cost of liberty.
The cost of liberty, the financial. I guess back up. The financial cost, right, to defend legislation, it costs money, right? It costs the state money, particularly when it's parring with the federal government, right? So, is this important to you to walk that path? I bring it back to the people first, right? Because we represent the people.
What if so? I'll ask you another question in a second.
Okay, but I'm not afraid of sticky notes from lawyers, I guess is the final thing. And if it's something that we feel convicted about, we have conviction about it, then who cares?
Lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. Does that mean anything to anybody? I mean, for God's sakes.
There we are. I'll probably have to go back to my district and defend it when they're like, hey, there's this lawsuit now pending, but that's okay. We need to be brave, and we need to be steadfast.
Okay. So this is a... man, my brain, I just went into a weird mode. What am I talking about? Oh, yes. Okay. So this is what happens after you become a state rep. And in debate stages, you kind of hear some talk about that, about people saying, I represent the people, I want to have their input and so forth. And that is a good thing. But there is an interesting kind of moral dilemma of how you represent people. if 99.9% of people said, hey, no, we don't want you to put in that NFA bill, you could assess that it's less important to them, and decide that maybe that's not the fight. And there's a lot of area to discuss there.
Political will, all that.
What if 99.9% of the people say, hey, Nina, we need you to put in a red flag law, or we need you to institute a new handout program to Amazon? How would you deal with a big portion of your constituents? And 99.9% is way too much, but I'm just dealing in extremes here. How would you deal with telling them, hey, no, I don't necessarily agree with that? Or would the will of the people be above your personal ideas?
Well, if the will of the people is coming in the form of mob will, and I'll define that as something to take something from somebody else, right? Because that's what removing a red flag is, right? It's a law designed to limit somebody else's rights before they've had due process. That's why we're a republic and not a democracy, because mob rule is not the rule of the land. Same thing with the Amazon tax break. We're going to give a sweetheart deal to someone, but we're going to by force take tax from someone else to offset that, because those line items don't go away. When we make these sweetheart deals, we just have to find the money somewhere else, because everything Amazon's not doing, somebody else is going to pay for.
You sure you don't want to run for governor at some point?
Oh man, that would be so much work.
Yeah.
I'm already knocking so many doors.
It's a very good idea to start at the lower level, Shane.
What? So I have to go back to rights, because I still have, we've got plenty of time, and there are some things that are near and dear to my heart out there. I am also, and you alluded to it earlier with the Zoomers, being into their privacy. The Fourth Amendment's a giant, codified, inalienable right. Your right to be secure in your person, property, and effects. What can and would you do for civil asset forfeiture here in Georgia? What would you do?
We shouldn't have civil asset forfeiture in Georgia, period. Yeah. We're if you're not familiar with that, that's taking people's stuff before we actually convict them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could probably just stop with taking people's stuff. But
right. Yeah. We should not
I'm just kidding.
We should not be taking people's stuff, and certainly not without
due process.
The due process, right? That's the important part. And when we move away from due process, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And for everybody in the audience to know, civil asset forfeiture is not one of those things that's on the tip of everybody's brain. I'm kind of weird like that, but it's one of those things that is near and dear to me, because I see it used by sheriffs, I see it used by police departments, I see it used by federal agencies, and a lot of times what you see is people in bureaucracies driving those entities who sometimes are elected to do things like that. So I'm real happy to hear you are staunchly against it, obviously, in accordance with our rights. And another part of what we face here in America today is our electronic communications. Are our electronic communications covered by the Fourth Amendment?
Yes.
Can you expound on that?
Yeah, so it's like any other form of communication. If I had a diary or I wrote letters to my spouse, that's private personal property. And I have the right to privacy around those items.
Yeah.
So I sometimes, going back a little while, we saw where some tech companies were asked to unlock the devices of people who had been accused and had committed crimes. And that didn't feel good. That felt icky. And I understand where they were trying to go with that. And you're like, oh, the greater good. But again, you're taking instance where you've decided that someone's privacy doesn't matter because of X, Y, and Z. And anytime you determine that, now you have opened a conversation door.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they're promising safety that they can't deliver.
Right.
Right. Like it's a fear tactic. Here's your promised safety that we can't even possibly deliver, because a madman with a truck or chainsaw or whatever out there can come out and still do lots and lots of damage.
There was a video just the other day in Georgia, so a few weeks ago, who wielded a machete at a gas station. Like there's video of it, and he attacks the other guy. They run around the cars for a while with a machete. So yeah, there's no way to
do your cardio
to be 100% safe, besides building a community where people all know each other and support each other, which makes a much
and I think it was New Hampshire this last time around had a law that passed and got signed by their governor up there. All communications electronic are covered under the Fourth Amendment, and I think they anything like that. I mean, that covers things like stingrays and all that kind of stuff. But what a breath of fresh air to hear how well not only you understand but articulate the rights of people that are covered not only here in Georgia but at the federal level as well. I think one of my last questions in terms of rights and free speech is ballot access.
Yeah, so I support ballot access, which is
weird,
sometimes unpopular. That question came up at a breakfast forum I was at. If you were there, you know how uncomfortable it was.
A breakfast forum of everybody or Republicans?
It was a Republican breakfast forum.
Okay.
And ballot access came up. I support ballot access. Constituents, people deserve the right to have as many options available because that's how they can find the person that reflects them closest. Now, am I saying there should be 17
Democrats,
people?
Republicans, Independents, Green
Everybody.
Party, Libertarian?
Yep. In fact, because you give a platform when you block groups. So in Georgia, I was reading historically, there was a Communist Party of Georgia. And then the state blocked their access on the ballot. And then they weren't picking up steam like that. Nobody was dying to be a communist. Certainly not during a Red Scare either. But they blocked them. And then they gave them a platform. And that's like all speech is free speech is the same kind of idea. But absolutely, if you want to get a Green Party, a Libertarian, whatever you want, independent, absolutely. And I believe in ranked choice voting too, because I think it would save a lot of money. But that's a whole nother question
we
you didn't even ask.
With Smythe Duval.
We covered that with Smythe Duval and
ballot access with Ryan Graham.
And Ryan Graham.
Yeah. Both nice guys. I like both of them.
Really good dudes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've both sat right where you're sitting.
I feel honored. No, they're both really good guys.
Was over there, but
oh yeah, that's before we had the screen. You're
before
right.
we had the entire setup.
How dare you correct
Shane,
me?
I wanted you to ask me about red light cameras because they're awful too.
Oh, I don't. So, sure, yes, go ahead.
They're unconstitutional. There we go.
I agree.
I'll tell you right now. My truck at one point was cited by, I'm not going to say what county around here, for running red light, and this was years and years and years ago. And I never paid the fine, and I never showed up to court, and I never did any of that stuff. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Good. I saw a
because it's not
picture the other
defensible.
day, so kind of like a meme, and it was a picture of somebody being taken in picture by a red light camera, and there's a bird that flew right in front of his face, so you can't see who it is.
That's funny, man. There's Meredith and I were watching reruns of New Girl. I don't know if you guys
I've seen
ever seen it. We actually watched that episode last night where Nick's lawyer girlfriend and Jess, who is the main character, go to court or whatever, and she's gonna try to talk her way out of this ticket where the bird swoops in and she swerves and she's not paying attention to the red light. So it's funny that this is all happening right here today.
So I had a list of a bunch of things. We've ticked them off just because there's a lot to talk about. I've only got one more that's kind of big, and I don't necessarily know how you're going to respond. So hate crime laws that came up this session. It passed the House with I think only maybe like 30-ish Republicans voting no, and it did not go anywhere in the Senate. What's your take on
Yeah,
those?
all hate crime bills are garbage because nobody commits a crime out of love. So doubling down on the hate crime bills are awful. And
you know you're black, right?
yeah, I know. I own a mirror. I own a mirror. But I tell you what, hate crime laws. Yeah, and so if you want to take that position, hate crime laws are mostly applied to minorities anyway. So it's already a crime. So let's charge somebody with that.
I love it.
So in Georgia, if you ever look at the law here, it's 54 volumes on the books. 54 tombs. That's obscene. And so everyone is in such a rush to create more law and more regulation.
Let's simplify.
I'm like, yeah, hey, how about every legislator goes home, comes up with 10 things you don't like, bring them back here, and then let's do it again next week.
Yeah.
And let's bring it. I support sunsetting laws.
Oh,
So that is a law I do
yes.
support. Sunsetting legislation. So what that would mean is bills have to be reviewed. Laws have to be reviewed. And then we're going to decide if we're going to keep them and keep going
Bureaucracies, yeah.
and renew them. Because often we pass legislation as a response to something.
Mm-hmm.
And after that particular version of crisis is passed, the law is still on the books, but it's not effective or even relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do something about that.
Yeah, it's funny. They use sunsetting in Georgia every so often, so it has to be added to the bill. Like
Right.
this will sunset at X time. And 99% of the time for the past 8 years that I've been down there, it is used as a way to pass a bill to be like, oh no, we're doing this, but it sunsets in 5 years, and then in 5 years, every year they vote on like to extend the sunsets or eliminate the sunsets on bills from 5 years previous, and just
because we can't let them expire.
so
Right. We need a law roll call. If they made every legislator
Explain that to our audience.
if they made every
And me.
legislator sit through the reading of all the laws, all of them,
So the thing is that that's like practically impossible at
right?
this point.
But
Perfect.
it would paint the picture. We're all going to sit and it's line by line, and I'm telling you, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours into it, people would be
They
dying.
do that in states, right? I mean, they do that in states where they have to read every law that they're going to pass. And
So they do, but every state you can make a motion to suspend the reading. And that's just how it's done. So that's done in Georgia too. That's why you have clerks, and clerks are like auctioneers almost. They talk really, really fast because they need to be like this. And then the motion is made really fast to either they've changed the rule to where you only have to read like the preamble, or there's motions made to suspend the reading, which allows state representatives, if they wanted to. So maybe you say that there's a minority of people fighting for the right thing. They don't have a lot of power because the speaker has literally all the power, but there's still some kind of procedure. If some representatives, I'm not sure, wanted to, they could make motions that can't be stopped to say, no, I want to have the reading here. And then they'd have to take a vote on that. And it'd fail, but you'd waste like maybe 3 or 4 minutes. You can contest the vote, so it has to be another vote. So maybe you like waste 6-7 minutes. I personally think that it would be awesome if a group of renegades down at the state house would just waste time until they gain power back, because that couldn't be stopped.
Right.
And you'd be hated at the moment because people would be like, why are you wasting time? We have things to do. But if they did that enough consistently, just wasting time, making the motions, making a
wear them out.
making a privileged motion, which is not supposed to be allowed to be ignored, over and over, and just waste. You could literally waste out of their 8-hour workday. It's usually like 3 or 4 hours workday, but out of an 8-hour workday towards the end of session, you could waste, without them being able to stop you, at least 2 to 3 hours with 2 to 3 representatives.
Now we have a strategy.
Nice. Yeah.
But no, really, I think if we could find a mechanism where we could just show how much law is on the books that so many people are unfamiliar with, that would be huge. And that'd be a great step for increasing liberty, personal liberty. Be like, wait a minute, we got all these rules.
Well, I think I'll tell you what. I mean,
Can you tell I'm opposed to rules? I was the kid who didn't like rules in school. Did not grow out of that. Mrs. Smith, my 8th grade math teacher.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've checked everything that I've wanted to talk about, and with flying colors, no less. I'm not done with this interview, but
I've got most things checked off.
Yeah.
I guess I could ask you what your position on the death penalty is.
Yeah, so I'm opposed to the death penalty
nice.
universally. So, and I feel like it can't coexist in a society that is pro-life, because either we are pro-life at all stages or we're not. We can't be convenient about death. Mm-hmm. And all human life is sacred. So I'm opposed to the death penalty.
I love it.
Cool. I guess we didn't talk about abortion, but that seems to clear that up too.
Yeah, that's pretty cut and dry. It sounds like. I mean, man, knocked it out of the park, Nina. What I want to ask you, what are we forgetting to ask you? What is there anything that we've left off the table today that you want to tell anybody?
I think we have done a really great job. If you live in my district, I know you're worried about traffic. That's a big concern where I live at.
Roads.
My roads. So it costs $350,000 to pave 1 mile of road in my county. That figure came from the county
Is that
meeting.
a 2-lane?
That's for 1 lane. That's to put in 1 mile of road, single lane.
Wow.
We have a new turn lane going in at the middle school, and that was the cost for 1 mile.
Some pretty nice roads.
We have very nice roads. We have very nice quality of roads. If you live in my district, I know you're worried about transportation. Our roads are great. You're worried about MARTA expansion, though, more importantly. And I oppose all MARTA expansion into Coweta and Fayette County. So that's rail and bus, any form of MARTA. We don't want it. We don't need it.
Not just for your district, but in general, do you think there's any place for public transportation paid for by taxpayer dollars?
I would not be opposed to it if it was truly the most efficient, like cost per mileage per rider. If it's something that made sense.
What if?
What if
It's such a hypothetical because it's never ever efficient and it's never ever utilized the way it's sold to us. So it's hard to get behind it.
Let's be solution based, right?
Right.
So as if, when we were talking about with the income tax where we were extorted money to pay for mass transportation, what if we put a solution together to say, hey, listen, instead of MARTA and this broken system that we have, why wouldn't we just pay people to take Uber and Lyft and things like that?
Yeah, so that's a solution I can get behind. MARTA utilization rate, if you're unfamiliar, is about 13%. In fact, it was so low, they were paying people to ride MARTA so they could boost those numbers. So MARTA doesn't work. It doesn't work the way it was sold to us.
They'll still use it at 13%. In Cobb County, the use of the Cobb County public transit system is 1.6%.
Right.
What?
And yet it exists. If you live down in Coweta, we've got a little 6-bus system. I asked what the utilization rate, and nobody could even tell me what it was. So, free market solutions. I like Uber. I like Lyft. And a lot of people hate them, the scooters.
Yeah.
I love the scooters.
But I like them. I think that's an option to give people an opportunity to have transportation on their own terms. It's ultra personalized. It goes where you want to go.
Yeah.
And there's no huge taxpayer burden of it.
Right.
Or the maintenance of it. Because it's not even usually the implementation of the original.
Yeah, we're just paying for the ride.
Right.
So that's a question. There's what's it called? It's where the state is preemptive. So for example, the state has gun laws, whatever they are, and localities can't infringe on those gun laws. And there's different subjects that take away privileges because they don't have rights from cities and counties that the state says you're not allowed to regulate that. Would you think that a city should be allowed to ban scooters in their city, or would you say that is a piece of public property where at the very most there should only be regulation thereof, but that Georgians in a free Georgia should be allowed to have scooters?
Yeah. So touching back to and I forget what it's called, but it's what you're describing where counties, municipalities can't make laws that
It's the preemptive clause. No, it's something like that.
But the intent is that, particularly around firearms, that's what I'm most familiar with. That way, when you cross into different counties, different cities, you're not immediately breaking the law.
Well, it's kind of the whole point of the Second Amendment, right? Is so we have uniformity across states.
Right. So it's the same thing happening within counties. So I'm very familiar with it, on the firearm side. As far as scooters, I feel like when you ban a lawful industry inside your city, you're trampling on that business.
Good ideas don't require force. You like that?
I like that.
Private property would solve the whole solution, but we don't have that right now.
I have a scooter company. I'm operating my scooter company lawfully. I have the appropriate paperwork as ordained by the state and county, and all of a sudden you're telling me I can't operate somewhere based on city council?
Yeah.
So that shouldn't work that way, and it's disappointing when I see that because they're taking a free market solution out of the equation. And then they're crying on the back end about transportation. I say they in a broad sense, but counties or cities will tell you we've got a transportation problem in insert Atlanta. Okay, well someone's like, hey, I've got these scooter things. They're like, no, but not those, or not after these certain hours, and it gets regulated to death. And then we're back. But then we should all fund the public transportation because we don't have transportation.
Yeah, the city of Marietta where I live just bans scooters and vapes in public, and they hate freedom.
I really want people to leave other people alone as rule number one. I feel like that should be the starting point.
Mind your business.
Yes.
I ban scooters on my property.
Sure.
It's your property.
But it's my property.
Yeah, scooter.
So if it's all our property, then who gets to decide what's banned?
Yeah, I'm gonna ban top knots. I'm gonna ban things like
top nuts.
Top knots are like the hipster, where the dudes pull their hair out.
It's the man bun.
Man bun.
They made a word so we couldn't make fun of them. They failed because we can still make fun
I wouldn't
of them.
even ban that. If my kids ever wanted to have a man bun, it's like, all right, man, it's your head.
Just tell them it's like sumo wrestlers. That gets that right out of the equation.
This is going to look real good in 20 years when we show pictures of this to your kids or to potential wives or girlfriends or anything like that.
I actually don't. I think man buns kind of look cool.
You should grow it.
Long hair is really annoying to take care of. I've had it.
I think one of the last questions that I have, and this is more of now you're a legislator. Tell your constituents about what you do to have access to you. What are you going to do?
Sure. So if you would like to interact with me, I'm at my office at the nonprofit there Monday through Friday. I'm going to continue to be there because that's my gig, right? Being a legislator is not a full-time job, so you should be able to be accessible that way. I think I'll take a step farther. If you put food on your table through money you've made in politics, being a politician, that's wrong. That should not be a means of primary income. And that's concerning me. So in fact, I donated my entire legislative salary preemptively to an organization. I made this announcement when I announced I was going to run.
It's not your organization.
No, it is not. It is not. To my board's dismay.
I'm joking.
Well, to the dismay of my board.
Great question, though.
They were like, hey, I was like, no, I'm really interested in adoption reform and foster care reform. I want to support private organizations, but they're nonprofit organizations that are in that arena.
Cool.
So I'm not going to name their name, but they are in Union City.
Cool.
And I'm really, really excited because they service Coweta and Fayette County. So back to the accessibility question. So I'm the only candidate in this race that put my cell phone number right on the website.
Yeah.
Right on my Facebook. It's in every live video.
You're going to have like monthly meetings?
Yeah. So call me, text me. Let's get on Facebook Live. Let's get coffee. Let's do those things. I want to be accessible. If you see me in a public place, come talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, the only time I don't talk to me is I'm the adult leader in a Boy Scouts troop. That's on kid time. So don't talk to me there on Monday nights. But otherwise, I'm happy to be accessible, and that's important to me. And so many times I've seen people give out contact information when they're running, and then you can't reach them once they have the job.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating to me as a citizen. I would never want to do that to anybody else. So it's a small town. We've got one grocery store. Come see me.
Piggly Wiggly or Ingalls?
So the closest grocery store to me is the Piggly Wiggly.
Really?
Bradley's. And
I love Piggly Wiggly.
And
there's like 20 in the whole country now. There's almost none left.
There's one down in Jackson, and so...
Sorry, we just interrupted Nina because we got excited about Piggly Wiggly.
No, well, I have to tell you because I'm excited about Piggly Wiggly. The Piggly Wiggly near me had an episode of Stranger Things, the Eggo scene. That's my Piggly Wiggly.
Really?
It's the Bradleys.
I love Stranger Things. One of my favorite, maybe my favorite thing going on Netflix. They film in Jackson, the town part down there, where we go often. You came down to my buddy's property with me. The whole last season with season 3, when they started showing the preview of that season, it was this mall, and I was like, oh my god, that looks like Gwinnett Place Mall. And Meredith's like, no way. And
really?
I was like, dude, Google it. So she Googles it, and sure enough, it's Gwinnett Place Mall, which is weird because we were there a bunch for the GOP, and they hadn't started doing it yet. And so I guess they kind of bought out all the stores and revamped it and everything. And I was like,
the whole mall?
Just that food court type section of the mall over there. And so
that's where we had one of our first campaign meetings.
Well, that's where I grew up. I mean, that mall opened in, I want to say, like 1983, 84. So true to the series. I think that's kind of where they were in the last season, 1984, if memory serves. Like, I was like, wow, to see all these 1984 things happening in the place where I saw 1984 things as a kid. Like, this is really, really cool. So... I'm glad we're getting this little part of pop culture out of you as well.
I'm really excited. I guess as a point of clarification, the Piggly Wiggly is the closest grocery store to where I live. I live at the north of the district. If you're fancy and you live more center, you have other options. But I don't want people listening going, where does she live?
Don't give your address.
Well, that's out there too. So I want people to know how to reach me.
Yeah.
Like, that is really important. And people are really responsive to that. And someone told me if you put your phone number out there, you're going to get calls all hours of the day and night. I don't.
No,
I don't.
Most people don't have the will or the understanding to actually call up people who really know what's going on and have that conversation.
Yeah. And when they do call, it's always right in the middle of the day and they're super apologetic. And I'm like, it's totally cool. I answered the phone. So if you have a question, please call me. I do care. I do want to hear from you. Please reach out. It's important. What
else? Websites and all that fun stuff.
I've got one point is I see your phone number on your Facebook page, but I don't see it on the website. So
okay. Is it on the contact section?
It's not.
Okay. Well, let's yell at Duncan if you're watching this on the replay.
Duncan. Come on, man.
We're all looking at you.
No. It's a lot to do a campaign, and things can fall through the cracks.
So it's definitely on my Facebook up there. Can I say it live on your podcast?
Well,
is that okay with you?
Yeah,
or on your record?
Of course, please do.
So I have a Tampa phone number because I was really attached to it. So it's area code 813-447-7689. So call or text, and I'm happy to hear from you.
Awesome.
The website?
Sure. It's NinaBlackwelder.com. And the Facebook is Facebook.com/Vote Blackwelder.
I'll include some links in the show notes there.
Can we donate to your campaign through any of those sites?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's NinaBlackwelder/donate.
The donate one is pretty good because it's like the whole page is just donation options. Like you can't miss it. I like it.
I want to put this out to our audience. You know, if you're looking to change things, supporting people who support liberty and your inalienable rights anywhere you find them is a major, major thing. This is an opportunity for you to get involved. This, you know, in this race, it's going to take money to get people out knocking on doors, to feed them, to put signs out, to create awareness and name ID. And Nina needs your help. And I think she not only needs your help, but she deserves your help. I mean, in this audience, this is, you know, if you live up to everything you've talked about, you're going to be a rock star. I already think, I mean, and I see it for all of you guys that don't know, I met Nina, I don't know, a couple of years ago at a GOP meeting. And I think this story is indicative of who she is and how she is already leaving a legacy. And I hope you don't mind if I tell the story.
No, tell the story.
So I was, I think this was after my campaign, freshly after my campaign. I came down, talked about the Constitution with Coweta GOP.
Yes, at Golden Corral.
Yeah, at the invitation of Brent Frost. We were in a tiny little room, packed house. And, you know, one of the first things we do is we run through the Bill of Rights. And within the First Amendment, there's 5 liberties enumerated there. And I asked this room full of everybody from, I guess, 12, 10 at the time, somewhere, what are those 5 liberties? And we started naming them off, right? And you kind of get to number 5, and the room is just crickets, man. I'm looking around, and I've got a room full of adults. I've got sheriff candidates. I've got you name it. Senior citizens who were actually educated in civics back in, you know, single room schoolhouses, for God's sakes. And you know who answers the question when there were crickets? Her son. Her son came up with the last liberty of redress in the First Amendment. I was like, whose kid is this? And Nina's like, this is my kid. I was just like...
It's like the proud parent moment.
Yes, it's a proud parent moment.
That was awesome. And so we've kind of kept the lines of communication open since then. I got to sit down with her at the YAL convention in Memphis. It was just kind of this happenstance thing. Like, I wasn't feeling like I was there to sit through some of the college age type, you know, activation. And so I was up doing some stuff for the show and a few other things. And Duncan and Nina happened to stroll by in the lobby where I was sitting there all by myself. And they sat down and we had this amazing conversation. And you want to talk about divine providence.
Yeah.
Divine providence is one of those things that I love. I don't think there's coincidences out there. I think the universe works in some pretty amazing ways. And now I am more convinced than ever, Nina, that not only do you need to be there, but we need you there. And I really, really mean that from the bottom of my heart. I really do. I think this country needs a lot more of it. I think people out there, if you are in the sound of our voice, I think you need to help her out. So get on those sites, help her out, send her 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks. If you got a lot of nickels to rub together, you know,
I just donated $5.
Put it out there and let's get her in office, because I think, you know, this is a first step. This is a first step for you. I mean, I shouldn't say a first step. You've already done so many other things. This is the next step. And I can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Well, I just appreciate all the support and love from everyone who the whole process has started since I first had the very first conversation about, hey, I think I'm going to run for this seat to this moment right here. There's been so much support, and it's from untraditional sources. It's from people who are just very, very... A pizza delivery man called me and said, hey, I want to help you, and I drive around the district a lot. I could put out signs, and I could do this and I could do that. And I appreciate the time and talent component as well. You know, of course, it takes money to run a campaign, right? But I really want to just let people know that I appreciate the time so much. And I'm so glad you guys had me out here. This has been awesome.
I'm ecstatic.
So before we go, what's the number one thing you've learned over the past 50 days? Or 46 days, I guess.
Yeah, I learned that people do not expect candidates to knock on their door. So I'm knocked about 500 doors personally myself since this has started about every week now. And people are always shocked because they think, well, one, they're expecting their Amazon to knock on their door, or the UPS man. And I'm neither of those things. And then they assume you're, I don't know, selling vacuums or, I don't know.
No soliciting.
Steak knives or something. And they're like, I'm like, no, I'm running for office, for a state rep. And they go, wait, what? And then people want to invite you in for cake and coffee and, and it's just, they're just so excited. Even people who aren't politically aligned the way that I am are just excited to be heard.
Yeah.
And have the opportunity to interface with someone that will represent them, even if it's not their particular political flavor. And I think that's really, really cool.
Cool. You ready for a lightning round, Shane?
Boy, I didn't even prepare one. I feel like I know almost everything. No,
you know them.
I'm kidding. What's your favorite book, or author, or type of reading?
Okay, I like historical fiction.
Historical fiction. You got a favorite one?
Not one I'm willing to say.
Have you have you ever read Gates of Fire?
I have.
Do you like it?
The intro's a little slow.
It is a little slow. Okay. Well, yeah,
Without giving away the plot to people who have not had.
If you haven't read Gates of Fire, it's an excellent book, kind of along the lines of 300 only.
I hear the intro's a little slow, though.
You have a favorite founding father?
Thomas Jefferson.
Okay. What's your favorite amendment?
The second. Because you don't have any of the other ones without it.
Oh, I don't disagree.
I heard
with
someone
that.
say something awesome. I know it's lightning round, but I heard this and I wanted to repeat this. So if you are hearing this, Mr. Georgia Carey, who left me a comment, somebody said you have a great piece of property for shooting on. And I said, yeah, and a great lake for boating accidents. And then he said something really profound that just killed my joke. He said, if it's time to bury them, it's time to unbury them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, like that deflated our haha that we were having about.
But the haha is so good.
Yeah, the haha was good because I was like, oh, yeah, boating accidents. So that has been really, really cool. Yeah. And I just wanted to repeat that because I thought that was worth repeating.
I agree. That's cool.
Last question. We always end with this one. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
You can't get everything
If you're
right.
my cat at home, I still love you, Mr. Whiskers.
Yeah, but shops catching rats. So anyway, we'll wrap this thing up now, I think, right, Banks? You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, Nina, good?
Yeah, everything's great. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. This has been an absolute joy to have you in here. I can't wait. Maybe I'll even push this one out before I push other videos out, just to make sure that we can get this thing out to audiences that like to consume things quickly through visual types of communication. But anyway, if you found value in the show, you can go out there and become a patron at patreon.com/rebellionpod. If you have anything to send us that you want to bring to our attention, things that we can put out there for everybody else to know, everything that you know, info@rebellionpod.com is our email address.
And if you find any value in the podcast and want to contribute in another way, you can leave us a review on whatever podcast app you use, especially iTunes and the Apple Podcast app. We would really appreciate it. 5-star reviews to make Shane happy. 1-star review if you want to be honest. There's at least one hater that listens
really
to us.
need. I know you guys are out there. I'm going to challenge you. Please go out there and leave reviews now. We need them. We need this to start pumping us up and push us to the top. Outside of that, this has been The Rebellion, your place for peace, liberty, and free markets.
We need you. We love you. Please help Nina Blackwelder.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.